Yeah, hi, it's Mark from An American in Russia. Russia wasn't always Russia, and the Tatars, well, they weren't always Russian citizens. In fact, they were once the most feared raiders on the southern frontier. And my own region right here in Tambov was right in their path and the recipient of their savagery. Today we're diving into the centuries-old struggle between the Russian state and the Volga Tatars. A conflict that didn't end with a final sword strike. It ended with something even more powerful: assimilation. The Volga Tatars are a Turkic ethnic group native to the Volga-Ural region of western Russia. They descend from the Mongol Turkic peoples of the Golden Horde. And if the Golden Horde doesn't ring a bell with you, well, maybe the name Genghis Khan does? Yeah, that horde. First, let me get into the weeds a little bit. Across Russia, from the Black Sea to Moscow, there were three major Tatar groups. The Crimean Tatars, who often dealt with powers like the Ottoman Empire, and they bought slaves from the Nogay Tatars, who roamed the steppes from the southern Volga to near Moscow, and the Kazan Tatars, who were centered in what became the Kazan Khanate. These groups often overlapped. Families shifted between them. Sometimes they allied with each other against Russia. Sometimes they signed separate peace treaties. It was a complicated web of diplomacy, raiding, and shifting loyalties. After the Mongol Empire fragmented, the Khanate of Kazan emerged around the 1440s. It became a powerful Islamic state, a center of trade, scholarship, and military prowess. But it also became a major threat to the growing Muscovite state. Now, where I live, Tambov, this was frontier land. The Volga Tatars, or Nogai, frequently raided this area. They were master horsemen and ruthless tacticians. And when I say raided, it wasn't just like food and stuff. It was mainly people they wanted to sell to slavery to the Crimean Tatars. In response, Russia began building a defensive belt, fortified towns, watchtowers, and border outposts. If you're curious, I actually made a video touring some of the remnants of these structures right near my home. They're still standing, earthen, stone, and timber reminders of a time when this land was on the edge of civilization. Let's jump ahead about 100 years to Ivan the Terrible, and one of the most decisive turning points in all of Russian history. Before Ivan's final siege of Kazan in 1552, Russia had already tried and failed 10 times to take the city. Ivan's last campaign collapsed due to bad logistics, but this time he came prepared. First, Ivan assembled an army of about 150,000 men. Then, in a brilliant bit of pre-modern military engineering, he had an entire wooden fortress prefabricated in Moscow, and they floated it down the Volga River and assembled it back together again in record time at a strategic point upstream from Kazan, the fortress of Svyazhsk. This became a crucial launch pad for the siege and a secure base to house troops and store supplies close to enemy territory. There would be no logistical problems this time. But Ivan didn't stop there. He also used a classic divide and conquer strategy. He was allying with non-Muslim groups that live within the Kazan Khanate, like the Chuvash and the Mari peoples. This weakened the Tatar unity. The Russians brought siege cannons, some operated by German specialists, and they used European-style mining tactics, meaning tunneling under Kazan's wall and blowing them apart with gunpowder. And that's how they breached the city. This use of gunpowder mining was highly advanced for the time, and it shocked the defenders. Also cleverly used siege towers, which were usually kept just out of fire range of the Tatars. Now, if you're not sure of what siege towers are, they're tall structures up to 10 meters tall with several floors where cannons or archers might fire from. Additionally, they had a ramp which could be lowered onto the top of the wall, allowing soldiers to enter the city. Well, that is what they're used for, usually. But in this case, they were more for, let's say, psychological impact. I mean, the sheer size and presence of the towers, rolling toward the walls, bristling with guns and men. This was terrifying to the defenders and contributed to the psychological pressure of the siege. They were used for distraction and cover, while Ivan's engineers were tunneling under the walls to place gunpowder charges. The siege towers kept the defenders occupied. Troops inside the towers created a constant threat of an assault, which distracted the defenders from the mining operation. And they were used for a final push, if needed. It's likely the Russians planned to use the towers as a final assault method if the mines or artillery breaches had failed. Once close enough, ramps could have been dropped to allow soldiers to storm the walls directly. Kazan fell on October 2nd, 1552. It was a brutal assault. Ivan ordered the execution of many defenders, but spared others, including artisans and scholars, whom he relocated to Moscow. Now, the fall of Kazan didn't just end centuries of Tatar dominance in central Russia. It opened the floodgates for Russian expansion eastward, and for Ivan, it helped forge his image as the defender of orthodoxy, freeing Christian captives and bringing Muslim territory under Moscow's control. But what came next was just as impactful. The long and complex process of Tatar assimilation, though not willingly at first. Now, many Tatars fled from Kazan, others submitted. After the fall of Kazan, the Tatars faced really just three choices. Number one, resist, flee to the steppes and continue fighting. Number two, to coexist, accept Russian rule, but maintain their own cultural identity. And number three, integrate, cooperate with the Russians, and climb the social ladder. I mean, some fled, some clung tightly to their heritage, but others increasingly saw opportunity. The Russian state made assimilation attractive. They offered land grants, trade privileges, and especially a path to noble status, if you converted to Orthodox Christianity. At the same time, the empire still needed the Tatars' skills as warriors, administrators, landowners, and merchants. But bit by bit, Tatar families began weaving themselves into the fabric of the Russian state. In fact, many former Tatar nobles became Russian nobles. They adopted the language, the religion, and the customs, and in return, they gained influence and wealth. Now, this wasn't a clean or easy process. There were plenty of tensions, cultural misunderstandings, even uprisings, but over time, the line between Tatar and Russian, well, it began to blur. And out of this cultural crossroads rose families who not only assimilated, they thrived. One of those families will go on to become wealthier than most royals. Their palace in St. Petersburg would eclipse even that of the Tsar. And their story? It starts right here in Tambov. Next time, we'll follow the rise of one Tatar family that embraced Russia and conquered high society, from frontier raids to Rasputin's assassination. Their name? Yusupov. And trust me, you're going to want to hear their story. Until next time, Paka.